Hi, everyone. I would first like to thank Condens Echo, and they're very generous to have these panels along with Black Hanger. All right, we are here with a very, very high power, as I like to say, panel. I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves to the viewers, and I would start with Mark, and if you could have a 2-minute talk about you and your background.
I've been in the business about, it seems like 200 years. I started back in 1954 as an actor. I then became a distributor in 1975. People say that I started the foreign sales business. It's not quite true, but it sounds like that makes me a legend, so I accept it. I have been in foreign sales, in production, and financing for the past 40 years or so. And the last films that we financed both opened #1 in the U.S. One was Two Guns with Denzel Washington and Mark Wahlberg. The other recently was Lone Survivor with Mark Wahlberg. And we besides financing the picture, we oversaw the international distribution of the picture. And what we basically do is use foreign sales as the basis for the financing, and then we add equity to it and U.S. distribution, and so we cobble together financing to make independent pictures.
Very interesting that you talked about that. When I am the attorney for film, try to minimize the risk the investors have. I'm doing a picture now on the life story of Miles Davis, and because of all of the people we have in the project, and because of the small budget that we have, and because of the foreign pre-sales that you talked about, and because of Section 181 that is a federal incentive that I helped get going, and because of the New York incentives, when we finished the movie, the investors are in a profit of $1 million. So our goal is to just continue to try and put these pieces together, as you've just described, to make sure that the risk is sort of minimized. Liz, tell us about you, please.
Hello, I'm Liz Rosenthal. I'm the founder of a company called Power to the Pixel. So we look at new ways that entertainment formats are being developed. We look at very specifically how users and audiences are changing due to technology. So we're looking at way beyond developing single media formats. So I come from the independent film business, and I saw how difficult that was as a business. I worked with a division of the Independent Film Channel, and despite the fact that the films that we worked on won many great festival awards at Sundance and other festivals, we saw it was very difficult to ever get those films to an audience. And I became very interested in how digitization and the internet was going to change the whole business, and the entertainment business. And now the company helps develop projects that are beyond single feature films. It's about developing brands, I guess. And it's looking very closely at where users and audiences are, what they're doing, how you engage with them, and then how you develop projects right from the bottom up, not in a vacuum where we develop things for 5 years and then distribute them and hope that someone's going to see them because we put loads of marketing spend on. It's like thinking in different ways that you can prototype ideas in a similar way that the tech business works. So we help develop projects, and we also help broker relationships between different industry silos in those projects. So not just the film business, but we go to the television business, the tech business, the publishing and advertising worlds as well.
You're going to hear about the technology stage from Andrew when we get to him, because he's one that's going to fill you with great words about how technology in his field through Octopus has really changed. Peter?
Hi, my name's Peter Graham. I'm managing member of 120DB Films. We're basically an independent film financier. We're backed by a $100 million fund from an insurance company. We focus pretty much exclusively on independent film production. We do anything from a small $1 million budget film up to probably about a $20 million budget film. We provide the debt financing. We like to think of ourselves as the non-bank bank, or the FedEx of finance, because we move much much faster than the banks. And productions, they never have enough time to get their money. And this is why people come to us, because we can move very, very quickly and help save the production from falling apart.
How long have you been in the film business?
I have been doing this close to 24 years at various banks. I left, quote unquote, banking about 9 years ago, and I've been with my partner Steve Hayes, who used to run a hedge fund, who's in New York, and I think we've done probably over 90 films since we've been partners.
How has it changed for you over the last few years from an international standpoint?
It's the market has changed. Two biggest changes over the years were, one, when I first started, there were no subsidies in the U.S., so most of the subsidies were European, so we did all our productions there. It has transitioned where the states have done as many subsidies as foreign, except for California, which we hardly ever finance any movies in California. So you see more production, I think, in the U.S. from state subsidies. But the other biggest change, I think, is the market and the demand for films. Where we started, I remember HBO would pay $500,000 for an independent film. They don't buy independent films. They do it themselves. And I think the audience has become much more selective. You can get your film sold, but it has to be perfect. You have to have the right cast, the right story, and the right genre, or no one wants it.
Peter, we understand there are 41 states that have meaningful incentives that just give back money for spending in the states based on jobs and business that's done in the filming. We had the federal government from 2004 to the end of 2013, and I'm trying to artfully bring it back, that also added a federal incentive whereby a taxpayer can invest in a film and you can effectively wipe out or substantially wipe out their federal taxes. So when you look at films that you're going to debt finance, do you put a lien on the rebates or the transferable tax credits as part of your debt?
Yeah, we do. We're one of the lenders who will lend against both the tax credits, the pre-sale, and gap, which is the future value of the film. So some people do one or the other. We do all of the tranches in that respect. And yes, we do, because we're a lender, we take security, first priority. I mean, we are the kind of classic bank, except we just don't act like bankers.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go to Patrick first before I go to this fine gentleman here. Patrick, very interestingly, as a side note, I met Patrick on a plane coming over here from Nice, and from London to Nice, and we became fast friends, and I learned a tremendous amount about how his London business has grown and the international aspects about your business and how it probably will change in the future and how it's changed now. Could you give some background on you and your company and your partner?
With pleasure. Thank you very much, Corky. I've been in the film industry for about 10 years. In London based, and 4 years ago we set up a post-production company called Creativity Media. We've posted 30 films, mostly UK, European indies, and last year we partnered with a venture capital fund in the city to set up Creativity Capital, which is a debt finance company. But and I very much like Peter's expression of a bank without a bank. That's kind of what we are as well. So we provide, the usual array of debt financing from secured loans against tax credits, pre-sales, and also gap. And it is something where, the flexibility, speed, and ease is certainly appreciated. For instance, because we own a post-production company, we don't need a bond. We're able to finance films that are outside of the Anglo-Saxon bonded market, which, sits very well with our German, our more, French, and then some of the other finance models. We work with, international financiers on independent films. And yes, it's gotten harder, but it's something where if you're light on your feet, especially with company overheads, and this goes for post-production as well, you can have a company that can adapt to the market very, very quickly, and then still, and then still be able to, make not just survive but grow a business and a company with it.
Well, tell us about your partner, who has been your partner, I guess, since the inception of your business. What is his background?
So there's two partners, Richard Condell and Alex Joseph, who we started the post company Creativity Media with. And Richard and Alex come from a post-production background. My background is production. And the idea there was always that we wanted a talent-led company. We started the company in 2010. This was just on the cusp of where you weren't shooting on celluloid anymore. So you did not need a scanner. You did not need the laser out machine. You know, a DCP can be delivered on an iPhone if it has enough storage these days. So we started a company that was purely talent-led. You know, Alex came from $100 million movies. He did the sound on 2 of the Harry Potter films, Casino Royale. And then from Alex and Richard, we really started to try and get the most talented people we could and get them excited about film again. Because I think, you know, whereas the fat kind of years are gone, where you had easy access to big MGs, to big pre-sales, people got a bit slow and they got a bit fat. And suddenly, you know, film companies and post companies grew to immense sizes. But you know, the hunger and the passion for making films maybe started to disappear. And I think that's something that we've built both our post-production and our finance companies on.
Do you see in the near future, from an international standpoint, doing more business in the United States, with the United States being a more, really a more integral part to your continuing to do business?
Absolutely. I think the United States is going through a very interesting time where the new generation of indies is coming up. And quite frankly, independent companies in the US are making more interesting and often more commercial films than the studios. You know, the studios are basically just making superhero movies. You know, that really has pitched between the tentpoles and, you know, very solid indies, and they make amazing movies, and we'd love to be involved in more of them.
Okay, thank you, Andrew.
Yes. Good morning. How are you doing?
Last but certainly not least in this, you've got a company that's called Octopus.
Yes.
And I learned about it during my stay at Cannes this year. Would you tell us some of your background and something about Octopus, and how you can answer a little of Liz's question, is how technology has really put you where you are now?
Absolutely. Well, as you also know, my background is as a lawyer, specialised in intellectual property.
My condolences.
I know, I'm sorry. Basically, what happens, I represented lots of broadcasters, studios, content creators, advertising agencies, and various sporting bodies, all of whom were looking at the digital space. They got me more and more involved in their business as well as their legal side, sort of traditional American model rather than that in the UK. And what they realised in 2000, obviously digital space was more and more important, but there were certain limitations which existing systems didn't quite cater for all of their needs. They found them slightly clunky, they didn't quite follow the normal workflow and so on and so forth. So what we did is clients were saying, look, here's our wish list for the perfect technology platform. So what we did is we formed Octopus in 2006 with a ready-made client base and their wish list, which is obviously the perfect way of launching a technology company. And basically we do 5 things. We do live streaming, which we do for some major sporting events, but also for conferences where people charge $2,000 to be in the audience, but maybe $200 to watch online. So anybody can be their own broadcaster. In addition to that, what we do is act as a content bank. So all producers and people along the production chain can store their content in the cloud. It works in the same way as a bank, but probably a little bit more secure. And so what happens is you can do all sorts of cute things with it. So,
for example?
For example, rather than just giving people DVDs, which people around the market are still doing, you can do online screeners whereby you actually be able to monitor who's watching, when they're watching. It can ping you an email so that the sales team can then complete the sales saying, Corky's now watched my movie, make that phone call. And the biggest difficulty with Cannes, and the honest answer is, a lot of people take the DVDs, many end up in the hotel bins, unfortunately, they don't make it home. And those that do make it home, you've got no idea if people watched it. But in addition to doing online screeners, you can also then do the digital deliveries. So it starts to get really cute, and cost savings over tapes and couriers is massive. So just dealing, as you were talking beforehand, about being able to store your content on any digital device, what you can do with OctopusTV is effectively store your content and deliver it to anybody, including broadcast materials. The other thing which we can do is obviously we can convert on the fly. So rather than sending things off to production companies or post-production houses and having to do the conversion, again costing many hundreds of dollars, you can do the conversions in the cloud. And that then becomes very exciting and a massive cost-saving side. So what we're doing effectively is turning around and saving the industry money, whilst at the same time providing additional functionality within a one-stop shop.
When you talk about cost savings, and you already talked about what it costs generally without doing this, without going into your exact costs,
Yeah.
what is the percentage of savings approximately?
Well, it's massive. I mean, and the massive is a nice, easy, quantifiable figure. But the basis of principle, if you know how much it costs, what we work with every client is say, let's look at your existing costs, let's look at your existing workflow, and we can guarantee we'll provide you a better system for a better price. The costs are very transparent. There's basically a setup. But for people in Canada, at the moment, it's free if you go to OctopusTV for a limited time. Available now. But in addition to that, it's rather like a mobile phone bill. So it's based on use.
Okay.
So you have storage with storage in the cloud, and the rest of it's based on bandwidth, which is delivery. So everything is transparent. It's based on, so the smallest producer with one title can make huge savings to those with a massive library, from big distributors to independent film producers.
I just wanted to ask him what he means by storage in the cloud.
Storage in the cloud. I mean, and there's lots. The one thing I hate about technology is that people always bandy these sort of jargon around, and people get completely lost. The word cloud is a buzzword at the moment. All it basically means, and the best analogy is your online banking. Is what it means is that we have a massive server farm in the same way as Google have massive server farms, where the content is stored on that server. But through your connected device, you can access it in the same way as you can access your money. And so it is that easy. And I believe that what you have to do is that you don't need to run off to your IT department to turn around and say, okay, I need to digitally deliver these. What we do is everything is sort of picture-based. So if you want to upload a file, you've got a nice little arrow, people click on it, so it's one click away. I always believe that sophistication is basically the new simplicity. You work on the basis that simplicity is the new sophistication. And if you want to have a light, you press a button, a light comes on. You don't need to understand the technology in order to utilize it. So when I talk about storage in the cloud, all that is you're able to access your content on any device and also all future devices, but you can then deliver that content anywhere in the world. You can also manipulate it and convert it to different formats, and you can also at any stage work out where your sales are, where your deliveries are, when people have watched it, and all that rich statistical reporting as well.
Liz, hearing that, how does that affect your business?
Well, I think a main problem has been delivery and distribution, and I think these kind of services are amazing. So I'm always very interested in hearing about them. But this is purely a business-to-business solution. It's not a business-to-consumer.
Well, we actually enable companies to do anything with their content. So actually, and we do have clients who suddenly turn around and be their own VOD platform, because you can monetize it, and we can put a payment gateway in to make that happen. And one of the things I like, and again, because it's client-based, rather than saying burying yourself away for 2 or 3 years, coming out with the technology and saying, here we are, come and use us, working backwards from what clients want to do, say, look, this is what we need to happen. And so what we also work on is the basis that with techies, I sort of go away and say, look, the answer has always got to be yes. I'll feed as much pizza and beer as you need, but the answer has to be yes. So clients would turn around and say, this is what we want to do with our content. If they want to be their own video on demand platform, we can enable that. And you could put a payment gateway and so on and so forth.
So I think a lot of what you're talking about is sort of linear content as well. So a lot of the work that we're working on is actually new forms of storytelling and new forms of entertainment, maybe interactive.
Yes.
And this is quite a big problem when you talk about simplicity, because when you're dealing with new types of interfaces, it can be very complicated.
Right.
And that's been a real problem in terms of even things that are developed for the iPad, because when you get upgrades and there's technology changes, in our business, where we're developing these new types of products, it's actually quite a problem. Technology can become a problem because either the interface is too complicated for the user, or you've got to completely evolve the whole time for technology.
And you're absolutely right on that, because what happens is with technology, people want to show off. They want to show off with jargon. They want to show off with really complicated interfaces, which are crazy. What you want to do, as I say, simplicity is the new sophistication. We have a very picture-based system, so it spreads. It's used around the world. It can be used in any country where language is not a barrier. And if you'd work on that sort of basis, one click away can solve that. But what's guaranteed, as you say, Liz, is that formats are going to change.
And so you need very sophisticated interfaces.
Exactly.
And I think in the business I'm at, we're creating sort of maybe entertainment brands that exist on different platforms that you can engage with in different ways. So there may be an idea or a story that exists as a game, which you can play or you can be involved in some way that's part of a bigger story world. And the film is part of the other bit of the story world. And there may be a book, a traditional book, and there may be a live event. So we're talking about all shapes of entertainment. And the difficult thing is, how do you tie those things together
But
sometimes?
the other problem as well, which you find, is that whilst we have all these new platforms and so on and so forth, people are not using them in the right way. So a lot of these platforms will give you interactivity, but producers and content creators and story makers are not yet utilising that full. And mainly because I think, going back to your point, is that they make it too complicated. So if they understand the power and the functionality of a lot of these new platforms, you can make content accordingly.
So, for example, we have labs where we develop content, where we put producers and financiers and creative technologists together, because these are very different languages.
Yes.
And that's what we have to do, is really break the silos, I think, Dan. And it's always a big problem. It's almost, technology in the film industry has almost become templated.
Yes.
We've kind of forgotten it exists because it became seamless and we all became skilled and used to making movies. But actually, filmmaking is incredibly complex. It's just we know how to do it. But now things have changed. There's suddenly this blurring, and it means we have to create new alliances. We're back to when, movies were first invented and people ran away from trains. And that's how I see it now.
Let's go on to really something else. I want to tell just about a minute about my background. I'm a principal in the law firm of Deutsch, Levy, and Engel, and we've been very fortunate in Chicago that the trades have pretty much said that for the independent film business, we're a one-stop shop. I was helpful in the applications to the federal incentives under 181, and I am hoping to get it back, although there's a little problems. And what amazes me on all the films that I've been in, all the wonderful friends that I have in this industry, is that it's an ever-changing business. So as a lawyer, as a banker, as a person like Mark, who's done everything that he's done for as many years as he's done it, and Liz and Patrick, who's fairly new to the business, this is one business that for you to continue to be successful, you have to look at the changes constantly. And I know Peter and I have talked about China. And I believe that if you, in the film business today, independent, if you don't look at China as a true partner in some phase, in some form, as you move forward, you're going to be left out in some of the greatest opportunities that you may have. And we can bring up a topic because it's international, and let's talk about that. Briefly. Many times at AFM, at Sundance, at Cannes, at Toronto, there are headlines that say to get the China government to stamp the co-production stamp on your project is a nightmare, is problematic, takes forever you can take. The issue, after being involved in the China field and the government field for 4 years, is this is one culture that we can't just go to and say, we want to make a deal. You've got to develop years of friendship and being with them, and they've got to trust you in the process. So comments by each of you. How do you view China as a partner in projects now and in the future, Mark?
Well, generally at festivals, I will meet with 2 or 3 investment groups which are bringing new money into the business. At this festival, I've met with 8 Chinese groups, and I have another 6 to meet before I leave here. I learned that China is adding an average of 22 screens a day.
Can I comment on that? I having been in China, it's actually 2 movie theaters per week, but more importantly, there's no movies in them. I've been to China. As much as I love the people in China, much of what we do and what they do is the perception of what's going. They may tell you 22 theaters per week or day. They may tell me two. But the problem with that is when you go to a movie theater, you're not going to see any movie except that it says movie theater. So go ahead.
Where do you go from there? We're doing a film right now. We're preparing a film called Inversion, which is a $120 million budget and probably the biggest film that's being offered at the festival to the independent marketplace. One of the reasons we're able to make it is because there is approximately $50 million coming out of equity investors in China, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Malaysia. It's true a picture like this can do huge business in those territories, but there's no way this picture could have been made without these private investments arising out of the Asian marketplace. Right. So I don't know what's showing in Chinese theaters right now, but what I do know is what's showing are their pocketbooks. They're coming out and they're helping us make pictures. And as I say, this picture, which will be a very wide release in the U.S., we're thinking 3,500, 4,000 prints, could easily be 10,000 prints in China by the time it comes out.
Right. Liz, how do you look at China and what's emerging in China?
I mean, what's really interesting is their online platforms. It's like when you make a comparison between YouTube and Youku, it's huge. I mean, I met with a group of Chinese publishers, so from the print and the online world in London a couple of years ago, and they were kind of laughing when I told them how many people looked at my website. I was so embarrassed. They were thinking, why are we meeting her? But I think there's sort of great opportunities when it comes to, I have friends who work in the online world who create technology, and I know that a lot of they are outright buying software companies, technology, and also content formats now. So they're very interested in actually purchasing content formats that are being developed here. So I'm particularly interested in that side.
Peter, how do you look at China and what's happening in China?
Well, one of the things, if you've been in the business long enough, there always seems to be a new source of money from a different country. And it seems,
There was partly Germany for a time.
It was Germany before, and then we had insurance companies. And now China is the new money. But I think one of the challenges, and Mark has obviously been very successful in breaching this, is that it is a different culture. And how they do the business, we have been trying to, you meet someone, you sign a deal, and then you start your negotiations. And I think that is probably one of the hard, you talk about relationships, yeah, that's great, you go out and wine and dine, but I think where the European or Western kind of approach is just different. Yeah, and that cultural divide is one part. And I think the other thing too, though, is that a challenge we have is on the censorship side. And even though you go through the authorities and they approve it, they can still at the last minute, I think Django was the classic where it's literally about to be shown in the theaters and they go, we don't like it, you got to make a change.
But that's a
cultural...
Yeah, but that has to do with either a stamp on a co-production deal or it's showing in the China theaters. Right. That's not stopping the money from coming in to fund movies, though.
But I think the difference, and Mark, you can correct me, though, a lot of the money that we see, though, they want you to shoot in China. They are putting some money that you have other locations, but a lot of the co-financing is, at least what we have seen, is what we want you to shoot in China. The one we had looked at was Keanu Reeves' film Man of Tai Chi, which was shot for 9 months in China, and they, for roughly half the budget, they took China territory and you had the rest of the world. So I think it was a great support to help make that movie happen. But getting outside, I think it's a little different than, say, when we had the German money where you could shoot anywhere in the world.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say, as a matter of fact, this picture Inversion, which actually means anti-gravity. It's a picture that deals with what happens if the Earth loses its gravity. And as it turns out, the opening sequence of the picture, Earth loses its gravity first in Beijing, and then in Hong Kong, before we finally go around the rest of the world. So we'll be doing a lot of shooting there. By the way, talking about advances in technology, I find that I and all of my colleagues continue to use the word P&A, meaning prints and advertising.
Well, there's no more prints.
There's no more
There it
prints.
is.
I mean, when you
Digital prints
yeah.
now. That's the thing.
well, yeah, but we don't call those prints. Prints for me, 10 years ago, you would pack it into a box and you would send 300, prints overseas. And that business is gone when you think of all the laboratories that have disappeared. And so I'm still trying to get used to this and not saying P and A.
Well, even Prince changed his name to Symbol, didn't he? So it works on the same sort of basis.
And the exhibition business still talks about digital prints.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Patrick,
Virtual prints.
how as you begin to build your business, and we have a wrap sign in 5 minutes, so we have to be very quick.
Keep it short.
How do you look at China as someone who you would want to do business with in the future?
I think China is very interesting. It's something where the UK has just signed a co-production treaty with China. So the United Kingdom and, with it the BFI, the UK, sort of trade and investment, are taking that very serious. We want to do creative co-productions with China. I think the goal is that, it is true partnerships rather than just receiving money. Don't get me wrong, receiving money is always fun. But it is something that is still in its infancy. But I think it's, new markets are fascinating. Last week we were cold called by a Bangladeshi film producer. And we took the meeting. It turns out he's backed by a big family VC. And in the Bangladeshi film industry, which is still very cinema driven, however, they deliver their DCPs on thumb drives. Yeah. And so suddenly, you have 60 million people. You have films that on average gross 115%, and that's every single movie in Bangladesh. He's making movies that, with the right director and cast combo, is, on average doing 150, 200% of the budget. So, yes, the budgets are $250,000, but suddenly, from the financier's point of view, we're thinking, well, let's take a close look at that.
Okay, being as brief as you can.
Yes.
Give some thoughts about China.
Well, two things. OctopusTV were very lucky. We got involved with the Beijing Games. Where we were working with London House to help with the transition, basically using technology for user-generated content for London House itself. But one point I would make about China, and it applies to any country, apart from Octopus being the lucky number 8 is very lucky in Asia. The point is to find yourself a local partner. Because I think if you don't understand the market, if you don't listen to what customers want within that market, you'll never sell anything. And I think the biggest problem that people do, they have that sort of arrogance, if you like, that we're speaking English and therefore you must take our programs, is the wrong approach. I think what you need to do is to listen for a change to the clients and listen to see what they want to try and do, and to turn around and say, okay, here's our local customer, here are the local customs that we need to do to make that operate, and then as a result of it, those movie theatres and the zillions, whether it's 2 or 22 or whatever the figure you ended up with, they will be full of interesting programs which are for China.
Okay, to wrap this up, I again want to thank Con Echo for the production of this.